Hey everyone, Prez here, and today we've got an Aurora game to look at. Aurora is a pretty simple aggro matchup most of the time. You're both very fast decks, you're both very linear decks in this context, and most of the nuance in this game plan comes from which of their on-hit effects you need to block. Otherwise, you just do your thing, and Prism's math, as it is most of the time, is better. We've got our sideboarding here, and you'll see that this all lines up with our pure aggro plan. Aurora is a low popper deck, so we're getting rid of our passing mirages. Library will lose us the game if we draw it in the wrong situation. Genesis and Merciful don't block, and Soul Shield can be really, really clunky, especially when you're running a deck with this many no blocks into a deck that doesn't always present attacks or chain links that are more than 4 damage. Let's move on to the actual gameplay now. I like to go first into Aurora, but honestly I'm a little bit torn on the decision. Going first I think is good because it's pretty likely we get to force Heralds through on turn 0. They have a lot of block 2s, they have a lot of cards that don't block, and if they present the combo plan, their armor is lacking. Additionally, they can get value by going first with an embodiment of lightning. The upside to going second though is it's still an aggro matchup. You get to have the first hand, you get to grab tempo. In this case, going first, we get to throw a red triumph and they're forced to give us 3 cards. This means that we get to throw a second herald and be pretty comfortable or confident that that herald is going to hit. Getting to save a spectral shield and an on-hit of additional value is really, really strong. And if this herald comes through, we get to just grab Figment of Erudition, get a ponder, refill our arsenal, and threaten 20 plus damage on our second turn of the game. We actually get an arguably even better outcome here, where we get all of their armor turn 0. I'm not sure if this is really defensible from Aurora's side. Now they have a single point of armor block left, all of our eruditions are turned on for the rest of the game. They've just got no ability to block out our heralds for the rest of the game. They're going to be in a really, really tough spot. It's going to be an uphill battle. They throw an Entwine Lightning fused. Pretty simple, 0 for 4, go again. As soon as you see that Crown of Dominion and Ether Ironweave, you can be pretty confident that you're looking at a Cheerios combo deck, relying on that Flicker Wisp Arc Lightning interaction. Very, very strong. It's pretty similar to Channel Mount Heroic Briar, if you're familiar with that deck. It runs a lot of 0 for 4s with Go Again, and the downsides are that it also has to run a lot of block 2s and it loses some of its armor value as a result. We're pretty happy just to eat 4 here, and most likely whatever the follow-up is. Starting on 32 means that you do have to fight really hard for every single point of life, but this is an aggro matchup. We've got really, really good numbers if we commit to them, and they've already committed a lot of their armor. If they hadn't committed their armor, it's entirely likely that I would have pitched Pierce Reality here to block the Arcane on this Arcanate Shockwave and put this blue Triumph in front of it. No matter what, they would still be in a position to give us 3 cards or 2 cards in the last bit of their armor on our red Triumph. And if they don't block it, we would have got Erudition, get a Ponder, get a card in Arsenal. We know that there's not much damage coming from the rest of their turn, so just happy to eat it. Our turn, as a result, is quite a lot better. We get to throw an Angel attack as well as our Herald attack, and we get to play a Pierce Reality behind it, which just lets us snowball even further. We'll see if that's actually what I end up doing. There's an argument just to Arsenal the Pierce Reality here. There's also an argument to Arsenal this blue Triumph and not swing with the Angel at all. Again, like, we're kind of interested in just snowballing the value where possible and having access to a guaranteed Herald. If we grab War here, which we do, it guarantees a Courage token, which pumps up that blue even further. And we put Aurora in a position where, once again, we're saying, I got 4 life on my turn that you didn't. The life totals are starting to look a little bit more even in that case. I have a full grip, as well as permanents that are providing me value. What are you going to do about it? The answer, invariably, is try and hit us harder. Unfortunately, because we got an Angel in play, this doesn't always work. Into aggro matchups, you have to be pretty comfortable letting your Angels die for Ward 2 or sometimes even 1 value. You often just have to overcommit resources if you want to actually keep them around, and your cards in hand are worth more than upgrading 2 value to a potential 4. Lucky for us, we don't really even have to make that choice. Aurora can't sequence their turn in a way that starts with either Starfall or Arcane damage. We get the full 4 value out of our Angel, and that lets us be a little bit more aggressive in terms of how much damage we take, just because we're functionally reducing the output of their turn preemptively. That's the really, really interesting part of playing Prism as an aggressive deck. You get to preemptively reduce the output of your opponent's turns while asking them how much value they want to give you to stop your disproportionate value. If they say no, you get to neuter their next turn while having an amazing one yourself. And if they say yes, they're significantly hampering the output of their next turn. It's a win-win for Prism in either situation. And sometimes you kind of just have to disrespect your opponent's deck a little bit. Your opponent drawing a card as an on-hit is very, very strong, but they're not actually presenting a source of go again on the snatch, and they've got 2 cards left in hand. That means on the defensive side of the table, we have to make a decision about how likely is it that this hand is a brick for our opponent versus another way to give the snatch go again. Are they going to pop Lightning Greaves and play an instant, or are they just going to activate Aurora and arsenal the last card in hand? I've played a good amount of Cheerios Aurora, and the deck has a higher brick rate than you'd think. It's really common that you end up with a bunch of 0 for 4s in hand and not enough ways to get action points. I'm going to call the bluff and say that's what's happened here. That is the case. They pitch a couple of 0 for 4s without go again to make a surge and arsenal the last card in their hand. Because they pitched a lightning surge, we can be pretty confident that the card in their arsenal will have go again next turn. On our turn, we're going to lead with a red War Tune over the blue Triumph in our arsenal. Because of their actions last turn and because of the number of no blocks and 2 blocks in the deck, we're just wanting to guarantee that this first Herald hits and go for a really, really value-oriented play here. They didn't deal with our Pierce Reality last turn. That means it's just going to stick around and start generating value for us. If they dealt with Pierce Reality last turn, it might have been a better blind to lead with this blue Triumph in arsenal, getting the buff from the Courage token, coming in for 6. But leading on a War Tune for 10 leaves us the option of Halo for Triumph open if they draw a popper, without having to pitch a second card from hand. That's actually pretty good upside. Being able to just hold a second card and guarantee that you can use Erudition, use Soraya on the turn you fetch it, is really, really strong. Because we've got that Herald in arsenal, we can also be confident that we would have the follow-up if we go down that line. We didn't end up having to go down that line, and that's also perfectly fine. We created a lose-lose situation for our opponent, and we had a plan for did they draw a popper, did they not. It's a pretty binary tree. In this outcome, we still get to use all of the cards available to us, we still get our Ponder token, and we're pretty good at the game, it turns out. We rip a Red Wrath off the top for Arsenal, it's hard to think of a better target. This 5-card hand is really Aurora's last chance to do something in this game. If they don't put us in a position where we're on the ropes and have to start interacting with them, they are going to have to start blocking on our next turn. We've still got Halo up, we've still got an Angel in play, we get to take some really, really safe lines, and because we've already got Figment of Erudition, we can block with 2 cards here if really necessary. It's a little bit risky, but it's a safe line we can take in terms of preserving our life total. The other problem with Aurora is that it's pretty hard to scale your damage output without that combo of Arc Lightning and Flicker Wisp. You've got a lot of 0 for 4s in your deck, a few 0 for 5s, and a few 0 for 3s. So you end up somewhere on the upper end of the 3 to 4 damage per card range. Without Arc Lightning and Flicker Wisp, it's just so hard to get that number any higher than that. And that means that we can be pretty safe in terms of calculating how much damage Aurora can throw at us. On 15 life, with an Angel in play, I feel very safe. The other thing I've noticed about this game is that Aurora's really struggled to convert their weapon. Using your weapon is really, really important when you're playing against Prism, just because, I mean, especially for Aurora, but for a lot of other heroes as well, your weapons are the best way to minimize the value Prism gets from Angels. You notice that Aurora in this game pitched a lot of reds. That's a lot of lost value. Every single blue Aurora draws can be weapon plus make an embodiment on 1 turn cycle, and that gets you your guaranteed 2 with go again plus some go again value on your next turn. Missing that interaction, it's just tough. you lose a lot of value over the course of the game, and I think that really showed in this matchup. The other thing that really showed in this matchup is more common for aggro games in general, but just how hard it is to block Prism. All of our attacks coming in for 5 to 7, sometimes more than that, and often with Wraths to back them up, means that it's so difficult for these decks that are running a lot of 2 blocks to actually interact with you. That's the axis that the aggro version of Prism is trying to abuse. We are saying to the format, you can't stop us from hitting you, so we are going to hit you very, very hard. And then the goal, of course, is just figuring out what to do with the decks that can stop you from hitting them. They ended up having to restart this turn. Just wanted to take a different line, or maybe Talishar was being a little bit more difficult than it needed to be. Couldn't be Talishar. But restarting this turn is fine. I want them to take the correct line, and they should definitely be playing that Flittering Charge a second time after somersaulting it back to hand. 4 is about the life total I expected to end this turn on. Because I'm pretty confident that I can get them to start blocking on my next turn, and when they start blocking, they start dying, I'm happy going down to a low life total. The only point that matters is the last one, and in these aggressive Runeblade matchups, the only card you really need to think about is Sigil of Suffering as a way to deal arcane damage to you on your own turn. Otherwise, normal rules apply. If we can push through their defenses and force them to commit a lot of cards, they won't be able to hit back very hard. We're just going to let the rest of this turn play out as intended, put us down to 4, and hopefully set up for the win. Skipping forward with the magic of editing. So here we are. We're on 4 life, Aurora's on 14. We can pretty much definitely push through 14 or more damage this turn. They have 1 armor left, but we've got a Wrath in Arsenal, we've got access to Halo still, we have a Pierce Reality in play, we have Erudition in play. There isn't really much that Aurora can do to stop us from just straight up killing them here, and they end up making life a lot easier for us. They don't block us at all. It's very, very hard to. It would have been for 8, and then we had to pump to 12. We get to fetch Ravagers, deal them 1, awaken, and swing with Ravagers for a guaranteed lethal line. They don't have any Arcane Barrier left after getting rid of their Lightning Greaves. Some Auroras play Sigil of Solace, but the vast majority of the time it's correct to make them have it. In this case, they didn't, and we get to see our endgame screen. I hadn't seen one out of their deck so far, so it was a pretty safe bet. Looking at our endgame stats, there are a few things to note. This is a very short game, and this game really demonstrates how difficult it is for these aggro decks to block Prism sometimes. And of course, how much Prism can just abuse that fact. It's so difficult for these decks to really block your 7+ power heralds when they're running all of these 2 blocks, and when these more aggressive variants cut their armor in order to present a more aggressive game plan into you. They're functionally playing the game of, where do my cards line up? Does my combo line up well, or do you get to do your thing before me? Aurora has a little bit of that problem. The power level of your deck really depends on where your Arc Lightnings are within it. And Prism, being able to tutor Figments, just gets a lot more consistent access to that output, and the way that it becomes inconsistent is when your opponent pops you. In these really redline versions of Aurora, the only way they can pop you is by blocking with a card and using Lightning Press on it to push it above 6 power. That's not a good trade. Blocking with 2 cards to trigger Phantasm, it's just not good value, especially when you need to be killing Prism. You need to stop it from snowballing. The format right now seems to be split into decks that can't block you, like this Aurora, and decks that can. The decks that can block you have gotten a little bit more interesting with the addition of decks like Florian and Ira, and of course now Jarl. But for the most part, our known, our tried, our true plans still work against them. The other thing Aurora can do is play a little bit more of a mid-range plan by presenting more armor in Diadic Carapace, I'm pretty sure it's called in the chest plate, Temper 2 and Arcane Barrier 2, and then Face Purgatory as a 2-block head with a little bit of interaction. When they get all of this extra armor and they're happy to play a few more block 3s and take a slower game plan into you, you often need to adjust your tempo to suit. Understanding the tempo your opponent wants to play the game at is so important as Prism. so that you can identify when your opponent just doesn't want to block. If you can identify that and play an incredibly high tempo game plan in response, you end up with these kind of games where even though I went down relatively low to their life total in the very, very early turns of the game, you just blow them out within 4 turn cycles, and there isn't really much they can do about it. Thanks for watching. If you've stuck around this long, please consider subscribing to the channel. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this very fast aggro matchup, and I'll chat to y'all soon. Cheers.